I had a great chat with Lianne Van Dijk only a couple of days after her second win of the BMF. This is her second one. She won also last year. She was the only one to go out in the last loop this year. So it was great just to get an idea of how the loops went for her and what the conditions were like because they were quite horrendous and cold, a bit spiny. So it was good to get the lowdown from Lianne. Lianne is well known on the Imra circuits and also a well known ultra runner in Ireland and has done a lot of the ultras in the UK as well. You never know, we might get her over to the adventure racing side yet. So without further ado, let's have a chat with Lianne. Hi Lianne, how are you?
Good, good. How are you?
Very well. Thanks for joining me today. I know it's only, 2 days since your win below in Waterville at the BMF. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm not even an adventure racer at all. So thanks for taking the time to
Well,
talk to me.
I think you had enough adventures over the weekend to qualify as an adventure racer. So I think you're okay there.
Thank you. Yeah.
No, thanks a million for jumping on with us. I really appreciate it. It's really nice to have you and hear your story. And as I said, congratulations. We'll get into the BMF a little bit later. But I suppose just to introduce you to everyone on the adventure racing scene, you're an ultra runner, you're a coach, and you're living in Ireland for a good while now. And I suppose if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself, that would be great.
Where do you want me to start?
I suppose let's start. Where did you start running?
um, I started running when I was still living in the Netherlands, so that's where I'm from originally. And I've been doing team sports throughout my youth. But I don't know, I lost interest in that, so I just was looking for a way to keep fit. I actually did a bit of cycling back then for a couple of
Oh,
years.
very good.
um, but running was just easier. You just throw on the shoes and you could go out the door. And I also started traveling quite a bit, and it was just much easier to run everywhere than to take the bike everywhere. So that's when I started running, but it was only maybe 6 or 7 years ago where I started taking it more seriously, and I did my first marathon, and that's when things started getting a bit out of hand, I suppose.
It got legs then, and the mileage started to creep up.
Exactly. Yeah.
And when was your first ultra, Leanne?
I think that was 2019, I think, or 2018. I did a 60K in Ballyhowrah. It was an IMRA event, and then I did the Carryway Light later that year. And that's when I saw the people doing the full Carryway. And I saw the back of the pack. And that's when I promised myself I would never do anything like that. Yeah.
But it
I
wasn't too long more then, and you did actually go and you competed. And correct me if I'm wrong. Did you not win the Kerryway Ultra?
Yeah, I may have. Yeah.
Yeah. So after seeing it and deciding you weren't going to do it, what was the flip that got you after the 60K, which is actually a really beautiful run?
It really is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that. And it was also at the time I wasn't really sure whether or not I was going to stay in Ireland. I wasn't really sure about anything. And doing the Kerry Way and just meeting all those people there, it sort of I do think that's where it all started really. Um I think in a way I kind of knew that I wanted to end up in Kerry at some point. It took me a couple of years to actually get to that point. But yeah, just meeting those people and seeing, the community around it as well. It's more than just the running, it's all the people there that really make it worthwhile, I suppose.
Yeah, it's
So
a
yeah,
really
that's when I
good.
decided, and also seeing just the whole field, the front of the pack, the back of the pack, everybody needs to, cover the same amount of miles, go
Mm.
over the same hills, through the same bog. So that's why I was like, I don't know if I'm good at this, but I was like, I. Might as well try it. So I
Yeah.
gave it a shot.
Yeah, no, and they're a really great community, especially, well, in any of the ultra running, they're all a great community. But I suppose the Kerry Way is kind of something special, isn't it? There is something really nice about it. And they're, with Shawnee and Eileen, and like they're a great community down there.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And just so many runners who come back year after year, so
Yeah,
it's sort of an annual reunion, really.
yeah, for everyone.
Yeah.
So I suppose kind of taken from there and moving on, you've obviously really ingrained yourself into the ultra running community here in Ireland. You had a busy few years with ultra running, with the different races that you've done over in the UK and here. I think you did the Northern Traverse as well, didn't you?
Yeah.
And is it the 13 valleys?
Yeah, I did that last September. Yeah.
Yeah. So like you've been pretty busy with all of those. Um and especially you've done a couple this year already, I suppose, kind of back to back. How do you find that from a training perspective in terms of having multiple long distance races together?
Um, I usually recover pretty quickly, so I often just need to sort of hold myself back and not do too much because
Mm,
there's so many races out there and they all look amazing and there's so many
yeah,
stunning places you can go. Even if you venture out to the Alps and just into Europe, there's you could be racing every weekend if you wanted to, but the body
yeah,
won't let you. So yeah, it's you just need to pick and choose really and find races that I don't know that you're genuinely excited about, I suppose.
yeah.
Um, and also have some time to just I actually love training. So I sometimes even now, like my next race won't be until April, and I'm actually looking forward to just training away for a couple months. I actually enjoy that. I might enjoy that even more than racing, to be honest.
So the training is probably what you prefer to train than to actually race. So they keep you honest, I suppose, that way. And what race are you hoping to do in April?
So I'm going back to the Northern Traverse.
Okay,
I did that last year, but I finished it, but it didn't go to plan at all. So I'm hoping to go back and have like a proper go at it. And yeah, I still feel like I have some unfinished business there. So and I
okay,
love the event. Like the event itself was just I really enjoyed the routes and the volunteers and everything. It was just really well organized. So I'm just looking forward to doing it again and being slightly less pain. That's the plan anyway.
okay. And if you don't mind me asking, what didn't go to plan necessarily for you last year?
So it's a 300-kilometer
Mm,
route, and you're crossing England from you start in the Lake District and you end like on the east coast of England. And I started getting pain in both my legs about maybe 100 kilometers in.
okay,
So somewhere halfway, I could barely walk anymore. I had tendonitis in both legs, and they told me, "Well, you could go on. It's up to you. You'll just be in a lot of pain." So it's up to you to decide, whether or not you want to do that.
yeah,
So I had a good rest, and I was hoping it would be better after that. But of course, like it won't be cured
yeah,
overnight. But I could still move, so I finished it. But I did like the second half with just, um, yeah, it wasn't pretty. Let's put it like
okay,
that.
yeah. Well, that's sore. It is sore. Like it's not nice. Well,
No.
fair play to you for getting through it and finishing it. And what was your recovery like coming back from that then, Leanne?
Um, well, so I went to a physio and he told me I had to take like 6 to 8 weeks off running. Um, and I didn't, I wasn't happy with that. So that's when I got on the bike. And so I just started cycling. I basically just did the same amount of training. I just switched to the bike. And yeah, it's a long story really, but I got into a bike accident then. So got knocked off my bike, had to
No
recover from that.
way. Oh my God.
And then after that, I did get back into running. So,
Yeah.
but it took me longer than I anticipated because it wasn't just, the injury that I had initially. It was the bike accident as well. So, I was
Christ.
delighted when I was back running over summer.
Yeah, I can imagine after that. Gosh, like that was, yeah. Um, God above.
It
And
was
it was
unfortunate.
yeah, I was just like, just really unfortunate. But you were fine. You weren't too injured from the crash, or
Um, well, no, it could have been much worse. In fairness, the only bones I broke were in my nose, and
okay.
everybody was quick to point out to me, like, you don't really need your face for all the things you like to do, so you're fine.
You're
No,
fine.
just loads of
Yeah,
bruises, and the body is just, yeah, it just needs a while to bounce back.
yeah.
Um, but no, overall, like, no lasting damage anyway. So
Okay, so
that's the
that was good.
good thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So you recovered from that, and then what was your next race on the calendar after that? Once you kind of got back up and running.
I was supposed to do a big one in the Swiss Alps, Ultra Tour Monte Rosa. So it was a bit of an unlucky year, to be honest, because we got there and the weather was perfect for the entire week, apart from the 12 hours before the race where it was just a massive downpour. There were landslides and the
Yes,
race got cancelled.
yes, yes.
So we traveled back without racing at all.
Yeah.
And that's when I decided to do 13 Valleys. So that was my first race back.
Okay,
Um, and then BMF was the next one.
okay. And how did the 13 Valleys go for you?
Good enough. Like, conditions were very tough. Most races that I do, there's always some weather warning or some storm, or so. The weather was horrendous, and I think the dropout rate was like 70% or something.
Okay, that was a lot.
Yeah, so I finished it and I finished second, so I was happy out and I was just glad to be out for that long and
Yeah,
my body cooperating and just being back racing, you know. So yeah, it
yeah.
was good.
Okay, great. So you did BMF last year. You won it, and you decided to come back this year, and win it again. Congratulations again. And I suppose in comparison to the two different years, I suppose let's talk about last year's one first. So, how many loops? You did three loops last year as well, or was there a fourth? I can't remember.
Last year I did four. Yeah.
Four, yeah. Um, so maybe talk us a little bit about last year's race because it was probably a bit warmer than this year's so far.
Last year was actually it was really cold, but it was dry, so it's
Yeah,
just nice, bright. Like, it was very quiet as well. There was no wind. So it was freezing during the nights, but there was no rain, nothing. It was conditions were better for running anyway.
yeah,
So yeah, we did. It was kind of the same thing last year where we finished the third loop. I think there were three or four of us finishing the third loop, and I expected there'd be one or two who'd go out again. But then I was in at the start line again, and nobody showed. So I did the last loop on my own last year as well.
okay,
Um, and yeah, that was a daytime loop, and I had a bit more time to spare, so it was a little bit less stressful than this year, at least
okay,
for the people watching the trackers.
yes.
Um, I wasn't stressed at all.
You were happy out up in the mountains in the wind and rain.
We'll talk about that later. But no, so last year was conditions were very different. Um, but yeah, similar outcome, I suppose, in terms
Mm,
of doing the last loop on your own and just having to finish it within the cutoff.
yeah, for sure. So, kind of fast forwarding then to this year, getting ready for, I suppose, if you can kind of give us a brief rundown of the week coming up to the race, like what preparation wise, how does it go for you? What are you kind of concentrating on? Are you looking at foods and stuff like that that you're going to bring with you? Your gear check, I suppose, kind of give us a run up or the last couple of days before you head down towards the race.
Yeah. So BMF is slightly different from other races, other ultra marathons, because you need to camp there for the weekend. So the Friday, I went down on the Friday just to set up the tent and to get most of my stuff there. So I'd help with that, thankfully, because I
Yeah,
did that on my own last year, and it's not what you want to be doing the day before a race,
no,
carrying all your stuff. It's on a slight hill as well, so you're just carrying all your stuff uphill. Um,
Not what you want to be
so
doing for sure.
yeah, so I'd help with that, thankfully. But yeah, so the week it's more focused on getting all your camping gear ready, making sure you have the tent, keeping an eye on the weather as well, so you know what you'll need throughout the weekend, because it's not just what you need at the start. It could go on for a few days, so you need to be prepared for that.
Yeah.
And yeah, at this point, I kind of know what I like to have in terms of food and everything. So you're shopping like you're shopping for some children's party with all the Coca-Cola and sweets and
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
all that type of stuff. Um, but yeah, that was mostly then just not a lot of running, which is kind of the hardest part for me because I'm just used to being out every day. So it always feels a bit, I don't know, it feels unnatural, I suppose, to just to rest. But yeah, it's what you need to be doing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I suppose you're organized, you have crew with you. Who was crewing for you this year, Leanne?
So I had Joe Leary, who's probably well known in these circles.
Yeah.
And also a good person to have when the weather gets bad and everything, he'll
Yes.
definitely know what to do. So it was good to have him there.
Yeah, I'm sure
And
he'd be well familiar with the bad weather from like he's been out in the spine and stuff like that. So yeah,
exactly.
he'd be well used to it.
Yeah, I think he was jealous. I think he was jealous, because I got to have all the fun and he was just
Yeah.
sheltering.
Panicking, going, where is she? Is she coming? Where's the tracker
I
now?
don't think they panic at all. I think they just assumed I'd be fine. They were in the
That's
pub.
true. That's true. That's true. That's true.
So yeah, I Joe, and then I had Ed, um, which is funny because Ed isn't an ultra runner. He has no experience with crewing at all. I met him at a friend's wedding last summer, him and his wife, and he was just intrigued. We got along pretty well. So I was like, he offered to help, and I'm not going to turn that down. So he
No.
was there for the weekend, and he was perfect. I have to say, it was just it's just what you need, because when you're out in that weather, you don't need people asking you, I don't know, difficult questions or questions about how you're feeling or all that type of stuff. You just need to get stuff done.
Yes.
Um, and the combination, just having Joe and Ed there was perfect. So I was really, really happy with that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I suppose, like, the most important thing is having people there that know what food to have ready for you and stuff like that. Did you have that discussed with them before the race to kind of say, well, look, these are the choices that I want, just throw them up to me? And
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I had all my stuff there so they could just go through my stuff beforehand and see what was there.
yeah,
And they knew what I would definitely want. And then there's sort of options that you just need to have ready just in case. But yeah, they were well prepared anyway. And they also, because it got so windy, we had also a situation with the tent nearly blowing away. So crew was in charge of that as well. So it got a bit hectic at
yeah,
times.
yeah. I can imagine, Jesus, because it was so windy, like, and everything between the wind and the rain. Um, So I suppose if we move on, then they've obviously saved your tent and it's been fine.
Yeah,
So if we
thankfully.
move on to the start of the race, Leanne, like, it's a marathon. The loop is a marathon. It's 42K, isn't it? So, like, that alone is, some of the backyard ones are like 5K loops and stuff like that. So this is a big loop to do on your own. Obviously, the first loop you might be lucky enough to be with some runners. So I suppose maybe just talk us through the start and that first loop that you took off on.
Yeah. The first loop, it was funny because last year I felt like I'd done the first loop a bit too fast. So my plan was to go out very slow. Like I was telling people I'm going to go so slow that everybody else is going to be worried,
Mm,
um, that they should think there's something wrong. But then we went out and it was actually the trails were in pretty good shape and it was fairly like for January, it was fairly dry underfoot. So you're just moving a bit faster. It just happens.
yeah,
So at the halfway point, I looked at my watch and I was like, I'm doing the exact same thing again. I was even faster than last year.
Okay.
So I slowed down, but then you're not going to force yourself either. You just need to move at your own natural pace. So it was nice just chatting away with some people and just enjoying the fact that we at least had daylight. It was already getting wet, and we were already having sleet on the highest points of the route.
Okay.
But it was all pretty manageable, and yeah, you just need the first one. You just need to get it over with anyway, because there will be a couple more. So
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
yeah,
So after the second lap, you came in. Obviously, people that aren't familiar with it, if you don't make the cutoff, you get cut.
yeah,
So I think you had 8 hours, didn't you, for your loop?
yeah, yeah. So
Um,
it's a 43-kilometer loop on mostly Kerry Way.
yeah,
And so you've 8 hours to finish the loop, and the next loop always starts, 8 hours later. So if you
yeah,
go very fast, you'll just have to wait a bit longer for the next loop to start, because you always start the next loop all at the same time.
yeah.
Um, so that's the idea. So you can get timed out if you're just not there before the next one starts.
Okay. So I don't think, having looked at it, I don't think anyone got timed out. I think everybody made it back on the first one. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think everybody did. So you're at the start line. Obviously, people decide they're not going out for the second loop, or they've had enough. Um, was there was there kind of people at the start line going, okay, who's coming, who's not coming? Is there that kind of feel for the second loop?
Not yet, I'd say. I think there were maybe three who dropped out after loop one, but most of us were there, and you kind of just assume that most people will at least show up for the second one. So there wasn't any real tension or anything there. It was more just, I don't know, I sort of just being prepared mentally, to go out again. And
Yeah,
you're kind of wondering, that's when you kind of start to wonder how many more there will be after this one. Because two is kind of a given, you're definitely running two. So yeah. So, and we still have 1 hour of daylight, so you also just want to go out and make the most of that hour that you've left
yeah,
before it gets dark for quite a few hours.
yeah. And I mean, that must be difficult. So you're heading in, as you say, into your second lap, you get to the start line, everyone kind of starts off again. I know from looking at the tracker, a few did turn around and come back. So a lot did start the second loop, and I think if I remember rightly, three or four of them turned and came back. I don't know the exact figure. Um, so you head off, you're on the mountain. Were you on your own for the second loop, Lianne, for all of it, for some of it, or were you running with anyone?
I was on my own for a bit, and then I think sort of halfway or just before halfway, I met Sam, who I already knew, so it was nice to run with him. And there was Jenny, and I think she was the only woman who was left in the race at that point. Um, so we ran together for a bit. We sort of navigated up Eagles Hill together, because that's the hardest part to navigate, especially in the dark,
Yeah,
and especially going in that direction. Um, it was kind of nice because there was snow up on Eagles at that point, sort of the upper half, so we could follow some of the footprints as well of the people
yeah,
who were already up there.
yeah,
But yeah, and then once we started descending, I think we lost Jenny. I think she was slowing down a bit, so I finished it with Sam. And sort of coming into base camp, you start discussing, oh, what are you going to eat? What will your crew have for you? So,
yeah.
and it seemed like we were both planning on going out again for the third one. So we finished that one together. And yeah, you just start preparing for the next one straight away.
Okay. Did you have much time in between, let's say, the second and the third loop?
Yeah, I had plenty. I had over an hour, so that's
Oh,
plenty of time to, get
yeah,
into dry gear, have proper food, all of that. So, yeah,
okay.
it's kind of too long,
Yeah,
because usually in an ultra, you come into a checkpoint, you do whatever you need to do, and then you're out again. But
yeah,
here you have to wait. You have to wait for the next loop to start, and
yes,
that's when your mind goes, ah, you know, I'm kind of comfortable in here.
Do I really want to go out?
Yeah. So, and I knew I wanted to. I was going to. I knew
Yeah,
I was starting again, but it's easier to just stay focused, just do everything you need to do and just start.
yeah,
It would be easier. But yeah, this is how
for
it
sure.
works.
So you're fed and found. The lads are looking after you. Joe and Ed are looking after you inside in the tent. It's nearly time to start the third loop. What is like you're getting out? You're at the start line. Talk us through that. Obviously, as far as I'm aware, you went off on the third loop on your own. When you were there waiting, were you kind of saying, "Oh, where's Sam?" Or
It was very confusing. So we were at the start line, and the guys were trying to sort of shelter me from the wind because I was freezing. I'd already left it until the very last moment to just leave the tent, even because you just don't want to be standing there getting cold. So they were sort of sheltering me from the wind. So I didn't even really see much of what was going on around me.
okay,
And then he flipped the coin because he always flips a coin at the start of the next loop to decide what direction we'd be going in. So he decided the direction, and then we went off. And I just assumed that Sam would be there, and I assumed that Wayne, there was another guy who was still going. I assumed that he'd go out again, and they were at the start line. So I just assumed it would be the three of us. And I just stopped just outside of the corral, just so you've started your loop. And I stopped to tie my shoelace, and I noticed there was nobody passing me. So I looked up and I was like, "What's where are they? What's
yeah,
happening?" So I asked Simon, the race director, like, "What's where are they going? What's going on?" And he said, "Well, you better start running." And I was like, what do you mean? I was looking forward to running with Sam again,
yeah,
especially for that night loop because you're starting at midnight. So midnight till 7 or 8 a.m. It's nice to have some company then.
yeah.
But he was like, no, they're turning back. So if you want to go on, you might as well start moving and try to finish this thing. Um, so yeah, it
Okay,
was just me. So I did tie my shoelace, and then I decided I might as well just
keep going.
get a move on.
Yeah. Oh wow. Um, so you did the first two laps clockwise, didn't you? You went
Yep.
that way, and then the last lap was anti-clockwise.
Yep.
So you were saying the navigation up to the top of the Eagle Hill is difficult, let's say going clockwise.
Yeah.
So going anti-clockwise, is it easier? Is the
It's
navigation
funny.
easier?
It's funny because I always preferred going anti-clockwise because I've done that loop loads of times, and I always preferred anti-clockwise just because I'm more familiar with it going in that direction. Um, but in these conditions, clockwise is much better because the climbs are steeper, and then you can actually run, sort of jog down the downhills.
Right.
But now, especially once you're tired, like you can run some of the ups, but the downhills, the steep downhills, it was snow on ice, and it was all waterlogged, and the descents were so slow.
Okay.
Um, so it wasn't, and even navigation because all the carryway, you have these way markers,
Yeah.
but they were all covered in snow. So even shine, usually you can shine with your head torch and you'll spot the reflective bits on the markers,
Yeah.
but they were all covered in snow, so you have nothing to aim for.
Okay.
um so yeah, I in my head I thought it was going to be easier, but it definitely wasn't. No.
Okay. So you're just describing it there, like with the snow on the markers. What were the conditions like on that third lap? Because I know when I was watching it, I was there going, are they going to go ahead or what? So when you left originally, like I suppose describe, was it raining at that stage? Was it windy, snowing? What was the scenario at that stage?
Um, so lower down it was still rain, and it was only higher up that you'd get snow or sleet. But it just kept getting worse, and especially just underfoot.
Yeah,
It just kept getting wetter and wetter because the first loop we had trails, and we were all saying this is actually they're in good shape.
yeah.
Second loop was sort of streams, they turned to streams, and the
Mm.
third loop it was just rivers.
Okay,
It was
okay.
just
Lovely.
So it was either that or higher up, it would be frozen with snow on top.
Yeah.
And sort of the bog was sort of half frozen. And then when there's a layer of snow on it, you just never know where your foot's going to end up.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was
Interesting.
fun. It was fun.
For sure. And I'd say, in terms of footwear and socks, so would you have worn waterproof socks, Leanne? What was your
No,
sock
I
you
never
would have?
really do. I don't know. I don't like how they feel. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's probably a personal thing, but and I'm used to having wet feet, and my feet are usually very easy. Like they can be wet for a long time, and it's fine.
Mm,
It's just in these conditions they do get cold, especially if you're not able to move very fast.
yeah.
So up on Eagles, I did, especially the third loop, my feet were getting very, very cold.
Yeah.
But no, I had the same shoes for all three loops. That's also sort of a lazy thing because afterwards you need to clean all your gear and you're going to get wet again anyway. You're not
Yeah.
going to keep your feet dry. So I was like, might as well just.
Yeah.
I did change socks obviously, and I would let my feet dry in between loops, and then I would just put on the same shoes again because
Mm,
I'd only have to clean one pair of shoes afterwards. So
yeah. Yeah. Any preference on socks, Leanne? Is there any type or brand of socks that you prefer, or are you fussy?
I always use the Injinji socks, the toe socks. And people
Okay.
think they look weird, and they do, but they
Yeah.
work for me. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I always use them.
Cool. Cool. So with all the wind and the rain, like, were you worried at any stage up there, or were you happy out?
It's funny because I was only worried while in base camp.
Okay.
So once I was out there, I was fine. I wasn't worried about anything at all. It was only once I was sitting in that tent and I could hear sort of the wind and the rain going against the tent. That's when I started thinking, oh, what will it be like, higher up? And what if I don't know? That's when I started worrying. But once I'm out there, I'm fine. I was nice and warm. It's just rain. It's just wind.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was more the cutoff. Just I was at some point it was getting a bit tight, so that was my main worry.
Okay.
But other than that, no real issues really.
Okay. Um, I suppose, let's say, top three gear items that you wouldn't go on an ultra without.
Mm, in January,
Well,
uh,
in
or
any time. What would be your, well, whichever whatever you comes to mind. What would be
for
your top three?
this race, I couldn't have gone without like a good waterproof jacket. It's
Mhm.
just you're just done without that. You just wouldn't be able to go on. Um, And for this race, my waterproof I hate running in waterproof pants, but they saved me for this race, so I love them now. They're like
Yeah,
my favorite piece of gear. I'm
yeah,
so nice and warm.
yeah, yeah. They're
So,
brilliant because they keep the wind
so for
out.
this race specifically, I'd say just your waterproofs are it's if you're going to go out in those conditions, just don't go cheap, or you could go cheap. My pants are like Decathlon.
Yeah,
But just make sure you test them and that they work and that you don't get any discomfort or anything. Um, and shoes, obviously. I don't think there's one type of shoe that's perfect for everybody, but again, just train with all types of shoes and see what works for you over longer distances. Um, and gloves.
yeah.
Oh, my gloves.
What gloves did you bring with you?
It was they aren't even very fancy. I just have like thin synthetic gloves for underneath, and then I have waterproof mittens that I wear over them.
Yeah,
And after 7 hours, you'll have wet hands anyway, because
yeah,
you need to take the waterproofs off every now and then to eat or to do other things with your gear. But as long as the layers are working and you can keep warm, um, yeah. So it was glad it was a good test for my gear. So it's that's a box ticked anyway.
yeah. So yeah, at least you know your waterproof gear works.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Waterproof gear are a must, especially in winter or even in summer. Like in Ireland, you just never know. You can get some really cold, wintry days up the mountain. It's always handy
Yeah.
just having
And
to.
also, if something happens, because you can be fine as long as you're moving, but sometimes you'll just, for whatever reason, you'll have to slow down or to stop entirely.
Yeah,
So even because I've spent most of my summers in the Alps over the past 5 years, and even on days where it's just, where you're roasting, I still have my jacket. I'm always carrying my jacket regardless, because you never know.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Always
so
get that
yeah,
money back. Yeah, for
yeah.
sure. I'm delighted that you had a great race and a massive congratulations again. Hopefully, we might get you on to an all mountain bike soon, and you might cross over to the dark side of adventure racing and try one.
So,
Um,
how would you convince me? What makes adventure racing better than just running?
I think it's because you do it as a team. So because you're doing it as a team, everyone has their strength and weakness, and I think it's really amazing to see when a team works well together, what they can achieve.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's brilliant. I personally like the change of disciplines. So you get plenty of ultra legs there where you'd have a lot of 60, 70, 80K hikes, and obviously the longer distance adventure races, the expedition style. I'm sure Joe probably had a few stories for you. He would have raced a lot with Dardingle. Yeah, so I really like that. I like the fact that you can get out, you get a good hike, and you get to see the countryside. So a race director wants you to see the really pretty stuff. Like I've seen places in Donegal from Ivan Park's races in the Beast that I would never have seen, as a hiker, as a runner, as a biker. I just would never have put myself in those places because I wouldn't have known how nice they were.
Hmm.
Like we were on a headland in Donegal and we were hiking it at the start of one of the races. There was a 70K hike and there was a waterfall shooting out into the sea. It was amazing. So there's like even in Africa or in Raid Lowlands in Holland, I've been over, done that race 3 times, and they've brought us somewhere different each time. And it's just
Okay.
been amazing. And they've been cheeky too because they put in little swim legs, which are brilliant. Not too many race directors put in swim legs, so they're really cool as well. But yeah, I think it's the places you get to see and the people you do it with. It's great to go out, and I used to do a bit of ultra running in my time, but um it is great to do that. But yeah, I still love the adventure racing. I think it's
Hmm.
the camaraderie between the team and the people that you race with.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. Yeah, I suppose there's both sides to it, because I was just thinking there while you were saying that. Um, when I was hurting that much during the Northern Traverse, and even the third loop last weekend, I almost I don't know. I don't. It would be so different, doing something like that with a team.
Yeah,
And in a way, I find it actually easier to just sort of do it on my own, just
yeah.
go into my own bubble. Because the third loop, I don't even. I, I just zoned out for hours, and you're moving, but you don't really have to think about anything else, or you're just yeah, you're just moving through the bog in this case. Um, so I don't know. It would be much different. I'd like to experience it at some point. Doing something really hard with other
Yeah,
people.
yeah.
Um,
And I don't think you'd have a problem getting on a team, Leanne. I'd say you'd be okay.
I know one or two people who'd be.
We'd be delighted to have you over.
I'm not convinced yet, but I'll think about it. Okay.
Yeah. Well, if you're not doing anything around the end of May, come up and have a look at the beast. Even just get out on the course for a couple of hours and see the teams in action. There's one for you.
I might, I might,
Yeah.
I might switch things up after, because I've the Northern Traverse that's early April, so
Yeah.
mm, we'll see.
Yeah.
I'm not making any promises.
You could go out for a trail run there yourself and, maybe take a few photos and stuff like that. You could catch a couple of the beasts passing by. You don't have to go out and do it, but even just check it out and see what you think. We'll
Yeah,
get you over yet.
I know where this is going. Yeah.
Thanks thank you so much, Leanne, for taking the time out to talk to us today. I really do appreciate it. I know you're just not long after finishing that race. So thank you so, so much. I really appreciate it. Best of luck with your endeavours for the rest of the year
Thank
with your
you. You
Garden
too.
Traverse. Yes, we'll need it. Need to get out training now. I haven't done enough. But yeah, so thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And sure, look, I look forward to talking to you again in the future. Hopefully, get a bit of a lowdown on how you're getting on, and you might have some new races in mind.
Thank you. We'll see. We'll see. I'll talk to some people and we'll see what we can come up with.
Thanks, Leanne.
Thanks for having me.